He slipped a war medal into Keanu Reeves' glove box and vanished. No name, no words, just silence. But when Keanu traced it back to a dying veteran and the son who swore he'd never forgive him, what unfolded was a truth buried deeper than any battlefield wound, and a chance for redemption no one saw coming. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The gas station stood alone at the edge of a narrow county road, its sign flickering weakly against the night. Keanu had been driving for hours, heading home from a quiet outreach event 2 towns over. He wasn't in a hurry, just taking the back roads, thinking. That's when he saw the station, half-lit, nearly deserted, and decided to stop for a bottle of water and a few minutes of stillness. He pulled into the lot and stepped out, the crunch of gravel under his boots the only sound besides the low, steady hum of the overhead lights. The building looked tired. A faded open sign hung in the window, and a single overhead bulb buzzed above the door. Inside, the air smelled of old coffee and motor oil. A young attendant sat slouched behind the counter, scrolling his phone. Keanu nodded a polite greeting, grabbed a bottle from the cooler, and paid in cash. The kid barely looked up. Back outside, the air felt cooler, crisp. Keanu leaned against his car and took a long drink, looking out across the empty lot. That's when he noticed someone standing in the shadows, just past the ice machine and rusted air pump. A boy, teenager, maybe 16, hoodie pulled up over his head, sleeves too long for his arms. He didn't say anything, didn't even meet Keanu's eyes. He stepped forward quietly, like he was moving through fog. In one smooth motion, he reached inside the open passenger window of Keanu's car, placed something in the glove box, then turned and walked away. No words, no pause, just silence. Keanu stood frozen for a moment, unsure if he'd imagined it. But when he opened the car door and looked inside the glove box, the truth was waiting. A small velvet box. Soft, worn, the kind that holds heirlooms. Keanu opened it slowly. Inside was a military medal. Bronze star, blue and red ribbon, slightly faded from time. On a small plaque beneath the medal were 5 simple words. James W. Langston, Valor, 1969. He stared at it, heart picking up speed. Who would give this away? Why? Keanu looked up toward the road, but the boy was gone, vanished into the darkness beyond the edge of the lot. He walked back inside and showed the attendant the box. "You see that kid?" Keanu asked. "Tall, hoodie, maybe 16? The attendant shook his head. "I've been here all night, man. You're the first one in a while." Keanu stood there for another beat, unsure what to feel. The medal was too heavy for its size, not just physically, emotionally. It didn't feel like something lost. It felt like something left behind. Keanu sat behind the wheel, the box resting in his lap. He didn't turn the engine on, not yet. He just sat there, staring at the name engraved in the brass plate like it was daring him to forget it. James W. Langston, a name that sounded like someone's grandfather, or maybe someone who never got the chance to be one. The year struck him, 1969. Vietnam. The era of draft cards and dog tags, of homecomings that felt more like funerals. Keanu glanced around the dark lot again, but the shadows offered nothing back. Something about the way the boy moved, deliberate but not aggressive, like he needed to do this and then vanish, bothered him. It wasn't theft, it wasn't a prank, it was an offering. But it didn't feel like one made to him. It felt like one he was supposed to deliver. He opened the box again and ran his thumb gently along the edges of the metal. The ribbon was frayed, but still vibrant. There was weight in it, not just metal. Memory. He picked up his phone and typed the name into a search bar. James W. Langston, Vietnam veteran. Dozens of hits came up, but most were obituaries. A few articles, a mention of a unit in Quang Tri province. One result linked to a veterans memorial page listing Langston as missing in action, but it was outdated. Another listed him as presumed alive as of 1981. A small forum post mentioned his discharge and a last known address somewhere in Wyoming. No recent updates. No photos. No family mentioned. Keanu sat back and exhaled slowly. If this medal belonged to a man who was forgotten, then someone had remembered just long enough to return it. But why him? Why slide it into his car? The boy must have recognized him. That was the only explanation. But if that were true, why not say something? Why not leave a note? Maybe it wasn't about who he was, but what he might do. He turned the key in the ignition but didn't drive off immediately. Instead, he placed the metal box on the passenger seat and stared out at the empty road ahead. This wasn't random. It was intentional. Someone had carried that metal around for years, maybe their whole life. And now it was Keanu's. Not to keep, but to carry, at least for a while. The next morning, Keanu stopped at a small diner on the edge of town, one of those places where the booths were cracked vinyl and the waitress refilled your coffee before you asked. He needed a place to think, and something about quiet places helped him hear the parts of the story that hadn't been told yet. He placed the metal box gently on the table in front of him and ordered only coffee. The waitress glanced at it but didn't ask. Some things didn't need explanation. He stared at the name again. James W. Langston. He said it aloud under his breath, as if the name might respond. As if saying it gave the man shape, substance, history. Somewhere this man had worn boots that left prints in jungles, deserts, or city streets. Somewhere this man had made someone proud, or broken someone's heart, or both. Keanu took a napkin from the dispenser and started making a list with a borrowed pen. Who is James W. Langston? Where did the boy come from? Why give it to me? Is Langston still alive? The waitress came back and set down his coffee, pausing for just a second. Add a Purple Heart? She asked gently. Keanu looked up. No, Medal of Valor. She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. My brother had one. Never talked about it, but he cleaned it like it was the only thing that made sense anymore. Keanu gave a small smile. Do you know anyone named Langston? She shook her head. Sorry, but if it's from around here, old Ben at the post office might know something. Been here 50 years, knows every mailbox and every secret. Keanu thanked her and stood, tucking the box safely into his coat pocket. By the time he left the diner, the sun had broken through the clouds, and the quiet rural town seemed unchanged. But inside him, something had shifted. He wasn't just holding a medal anymore. He was holding someone's unfinished business. And something told him it wasn't just the story of a war hero. It was the story of someone who left, and someone who stayed, and maybe, just maybe, a son who couldn't say the words, so he sent a box instead. As Keanu walked toward his car, he glanced up at the horizon. Somewhere out there, a man named James W. Langston had no idea what was coming. And somewhere, a boy was waiting to see if anyone would care enough to follow. Back at the foundation office the next morning, Keanu placed the velvet box on Sophia's desk without a word. She looked at him, concerned. Can you find out who this belonged to? He asked, sliding the medal forward. Sophia, sharp-eyed and relentless in her research, opened her laptop and carefully lifted the medal. She read the inscription aloud. James W. Langston. Valor, 1969. Keanu sat across from her, arms folded, still disturbed by the silent way it had entered his car. Sophia narrowed her search. The font style on this is military issue. Vietnam era? Definitely. The name isn't uncommon, but let's try veterans first. Within minutes, her screen displayed rows of archived names, records buried deep in military service databases. Eventually, a full name and record came into view. James William Langston, born 1949, enlisted 1967, combat infantryman, Bronze Star with Valor, discharged honorably 1971. Sophia scrolled further, eyes narrowing. No forwarding address, no veterans group affiliation, no VA contact. It's like he dropped off the grid after the war. Keanu leaned closer. Any record of family? Sophia clicked again. There's one note here. Handwritten scan from a discharge paper. Says, emergency contact. M. Langston, son. No date of birth, no address. Keanu's breath caught for a second. Ma'am Langston, he echoed. Could that be the boy? Possibly, Sophia said, tapping the screen. It's all we've got. She continued digging. The deeper she went, the more she discovered how invisible James Langston had become. No medical claims, no housing records, no public activity. Just a long silence after the war, and then a whisper of a son. Keanu studied the metal again. It wasn't the polished kind of recognition handed out for ceremony. It was dull from age, chipped along the edge. A real one that had seen combat and cost something. Sophia made a note. There's a property deed out near Fresno, land and a mobile unit. It was signed over to James Langston in 1996, no co-occupant. It's still listed under his name. Might be something. Keanu stood. Let's go. Sophia blinked. Now? Keanu nodded. If this metal made its way to me, there's a reason, and I'm not letting the trail go cold. They drove in silence for hours, the metal resting on the console between them like a heartbeat from another era. The farther they went from the city, the quieter everything became. Fields rolled past, punctuated by rusted fences and old silos. The sun was beginning to lower when Sophia pointed at a faded sign off a gravel road. Langston, she read aloud. Private property, no trespassing. Keanu slowed. A dirt path veered off to the right, leading toward a small clearing surrounded by overgrown brush and trees that looked forgotten by time. At the end of the path, tucked beneath the arms of a sagging oak, sat a trailer. Not new, not clean, not abandoned either. A flicker of movement in the window confirmed it. Keanu parked and stepped out slowly, not wanting to startle anyone. He didn't walk up to the door just yet. Instead, he studied the setting. A rusted mailbox leaned against a post. There were old car parts stacked near a shed that looked like it hadn't opened in years. A flagpole with no flag stood bare in the center of the yard, the rope whipping softly in the wind. Sophia joined him and whispered, "Are you sure he's in there?" Keanu nodded. "Someone is." Just then, the trailer door creaked open. A tall, gaunt figure stood in the doorway. His gray beard was uneven, his frame thin but upright. His eyes, though sunken, carried a force that made them impossible to ignore. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared. Keanu lifted the metal box from his pocket and held it gently in his palm. "I think this belongs to you," he said quietly. The man's expression didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened slightly. "I'm not here to sell anything," Keanu added. "I'm just trying to return something that someone gave me." James Langston stepped outside. He didn't take the metal, but he came down the steps one at a time, boots scraping the metal. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, voice low and hoarse. Keanu looked him in the eye. "A boy. No name. He left it in my car and walked away." James blinked. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Recognition, fear, disbelief. He turned his head toward the horizon and stood still. "Did he say anything else?" he asked. "No," Keanu said softly. "But I have a feeling he said everything he could." James didn't say another word. He turned back toward the trailer and left the door open behind him. Keanu followed, pausing just long enough to glance back at Sophia. She stayed by the car, giving them space. Inside, the air was stale but orderly. There were no pictures on the walls. Just a television that didn't look like it worked, a dusty bookshelf, and a small table covered in unopened mail. James sat down without looking up. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water that was already warm. Keanu placed the metal on the table, directly in his line of sight. James stared at it. His jaw flexed. "I thought I buried that," he muttered. Keanu said nothing. "I didn't lose it," James added more firmly. I left it behind. Keanu nodded. Someone didn't want you to. James chuckled once, bitterly. A lot of people haven't wanted a lot of things for me. He looked up, eyes glassy. You said a boy gave it to you? Keanu nodded again. Teenager, worn hoodie, brown eyes. Scared, but not of me. James exhaled slowly. Then he's alive. Keanu's voice softened. Your son. James didn't answer, but the silence was enough. I thought I ruined every chance I had, he said, staring at the medal. I thought he'd never want to see me again. Keanu leaned forward slightly. Maybe he doesn't. Not yet. But he brought you this. That has to mean something. James sat very still. His hand moved toward the box, then paused. He didn't open it, just rested his fingers on the lid. I left before he could remember who I was, he said. But maybe he still knows who I tried to be. Keanu stood slowly. Then, maybe it's not too late. As he walked out, he didn't press further. He didn't ask for names, dates, or stories. He just let the silence breathe. Sophia met him outside, eyes questioning. What now? Keanu looked back at the trailer. We find the boy. The gas station hadn't changed. Same flickering sign, same hum of crickets in the brush behind the lot. Keanu parked his car just after noon and walked inside with a calm, unassuming pace. He wasn't in a hurry. He needed to read the space. He needed to feel the silence this time. Behind the register stood a man in his early 60s, tan skin, oil-stained hands, reading a dog-eared Western paperback. Keanu stepped up, bought a bottle of water, and casually asked, Hey, do you happen to know the kid who works around here? Tall, skinny, brown hair? He left something important in my car last week. The man lowered the book and studied Keanu with one eye narrowed. Depends, he said. What kind of important? Keanu smiled gently. Military kind. That changed something. The man didn't smile back, but his shoulders shifted. You mean Matt? He works next door, sometimes helps me out here too. Good kid, quiet. Don't ask about his dad. Keanu nodded. I won't. He waited. Hours passed. The sun moved behind the trees. He sat on the curb near the service garage, sipping coffee, watching shadows stretch across the cracked pavement. Then finally movement. From under the rusted belly of a sedan, a pair of boots emerged, then legs, then arms, and finally a face, flushed, focused, smeared with grease. The boy was barely 19, wiry and alert. He wiped his hands on a rag and caught sight of Keanu. His expression flickered, as if unsure whether to bolt or pretend not to see. Keanu rose, approached slowly. Matt? The boy paused, eyes narrowing. Who's asking? I'm Keanu, he said softly. I think you left something in my car. Matt glanced at the garage, then back at him. I didn't leave anything. Keanu reached into his jacket, pulled out the velvet box, and held it out without opening it. I didn't tell anyone, I just thought you might want to talk. Matt shook his head instantly. I don't, it's not mine. Keanu didn't press. I know he's your father. I know his name is James Langston. I know he served in Vietnam. Matt turned away, but his knuckles went white on the rag. Keanu added gently, I also know he's dying. Matt stopped. Didn't turn around. Just stood there, frozen. Keanu waited in the silence, letting the truth breathe between them. Finally, Matt's voice cracked, low and angry. So what do you want? You want me to go thank him? Forgive him? That man disappeared before I could even walk. Keanu stayed quiet. He didn't move closer. The last thing he wanted was to corner the boy. Some wounds you walk beside. You don't rush them. I don't want anything, Keanu said finally. I'm just trying to understand why a kid would return a medal in the middle of the night and not leave his name. Matt let out a soft, humorless laugh. Because if I left my name, someone might think I cared. Keanu nodded once. Do you? Matt wiped his hands again, slower this time. I used to imagine him showing up on my birthday, telling me he got lost, but he never stopped looking. I had a whole story in my head. He shook his head, bitter. Turns out he was always just 10 miles away, living in a trailer with no phone, no letters, nothing. Keanu lowered the box. Do you know why he left? I don't care why he left, Matt snapped. He chose to disappear. That's it, end of story. But you kept his medal, Keanu said gently. You didn't pawn it. You didn't throw it away. Matt's jaw clenched. Keanu stepped back, giving space. That means something. Matt exhaled through his nose, like he'd been holding it too long. I didn't even know I had it until a few weeks ago. It was in a box of my mom's stuff. She never talked about him, just said he drank. Screamed sometimes. Then, one day, gone. She worked 2 jobs. Died last year. Lung cancer. I'm sorry, Keanu said. Matt shrugged like it didn't matter, but his voice betrayed him. She didn't have time for stories about a man who broke her. Keanu glanced at the medal. But now you do? Matt stared at it. I don't know, I saw it, and I couldn't throw it away. I didn't want to carry it either, so I gave it to someone who looked like they'd understand. Keanu's eyes softened. You didn't know who I was? Matt shook his head. Didn't care, you were just quiet, like maybe you'd listen. Keanu nodded. I'm listening now. Matt folded the rag slowly, like folding back the edge of something too fragile to hold with bare hands. Is he really dying? Yes, Keanu said. Liver failure. Doesn't have long. Matt looked at the ground for a long time. Then, without looking up, he whispered, Does he know I'm alive? Keanu's voice was steady. I don't think so. The question sat between them like something sacred, heavy, fragile. Matt rubbed the back of his neck, eyes flicking toward the edge of the road. I used to wish he'd come back, he muttered. But not to say sorry, just to see what he missed. Keanu walked slowly toward his car, gave the boy space. You want to see him? Matt didn't answer right away. His hands clenched and unclenched. You don't get it. I built my life around the hole he left. I learned to be strong because he wasn't there. Now what? Go sit at his bedside like some grateful son? Keanu didn't push. Maybe you don't go for him, maybe you go for you. Matt scoffed, but it wasn't cruel. Just scared. Why do you care? Keanu looked him in the eye. Because I've seen what silence does to people. It makes them believe they weren't worth the noise. Matt flinched. Keanu added quietly, He may not deserve forgiveness, but maybe you deserve peace. A long silence followed. A car passed in the distance, its headlights sweeping over them like a brief judgment. Matt leaned against the hood of the car he'd been fixing, arms folded. I don't want a reunion, he finally said. I'm not ready to hold his hand and tell him it's okay. It's not okay. End of, it's okay. I know, Keanu said, but it's not always about okay. Sometimes it's about truth. Matt looked over slowly, and for the first time there was no hostility in his face, just the ache of a boy who had waited too long to be asked. Would he even want to see me? Matt asked. Keanu's voice softened. He hasn't said your name. But maybe that's not because he forgot. Maybe it's because he thinks he lost the right. Matt's eyes welled, but didn't fall. He nodded slowly, like a decision was forming in a place deeper than thought. You'll come with me? He asked. Keanu smiled gently. Every step. Matt looked away, then toward the fading light on the horizon. Okay, he said, almost a whisper. Let's go before I change my mind. Keanu reached for the glove box, opened it, and carefully handed the medal to Matt. Matt stared at it in his hand. It wasn't heavy anymore. Just on. They didn't speak as they got in the car. They didn't need to. Sometimes the road back to someone you never knew starts with a single step, and sometimes that step is toward a man who broke you. so you can learn who you are without the breaking. The diner lights flickered faintly overhead, casting a tired amber glow over the cracked linoleum floor. It was nearly closing time when Keanu and Matt slid into the last booth by the window, the kind of place where coffee never stopped flowing but nobody asked your name. The waitress gave them a brief glance before wordlessly setting down 2 chipped mugs and a metal pitcher of cream. Matt didn't say anything for a long moment. His hoodie was stained with grease and oil, his knuckles raw from hours under a car. He stirred the coffee slowly, not drinking it. Keanu let the silence breathe. He'd learned long ago that sometimes silence was the only invitation someone like Matt needed. Finally, Matt cleared his throat. I didn't think you'd come back." "You left something important," Keanu said gently. Matt gave a half shrug. "Important to him, maybe. Not to me." Keanu met his eyes. "You didn't throw it away. You placed it in someone's hands. That matters." Matt leaned back, arms crossed, his jaw tense. "He left when I was 5. Just walked out. No warning, no note, nothing. My mom tried to explain it like it was war trauma or something he couldn't name, but trauma doesn't tuck its tail and vanish." He looked out the window, where rain had started tapping faintly against the glass. "He used to drink. That's what I remember most. Not the uniform, not the stories, just the bottles. And her crying in the bathroom when she thought I was asleep." Keanu remained still, listening. "After he left, we moved a lot. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us fed. She kept this box of stuff. Old photos, paperwork, medals. I never really looked at it. But after she died last year, I finally opened it." Matt looked down at his hands. "I saw the medal, held it, read the name. I didn't know what to feel, so I just put it in my pocket and waited, not sure for what. Until you showed up." Keanu waited, then asked softly, "Why give it to me?" Matt's voice dropped. "Because it didn't belong to me, and I didn't want it to follow me." Keanu leaned back slightly, absorbing the weight in Matt's words. There was no anger in his voice anymore, just exhaustion. The kind that came from years of building a wall, brick by brick, against memories that never stopped knocking. Matt added, quieter now, "You know what the worst part is? I don't even hate him anymore. I just don't know who he was. He was a name and a story my mom stopped telling." The coffee sat untouched between them. "I thought," Matt continued, "maybe if I gave that medal away, it'd be like handing back the part of my life I never asked for." Keanu nodded slowly. "But life doesn't always take things back. Sometimes it waits for us to decide what they meant." Matt's fingers fidgeted with the edge of his napkin. "I didn't come from him. I came from my mom's strength. She got me through school. She made sure I didn't turn into whatever he was. That's the part of me that matters." Keanu gently pushed his mug forward. "And that's the part she'd want you to carry with pride. But sometimes, the part we try to bury still has something to teach us." Matt let out a faint breath, not quite a sigh. "He doesn't even know I'm alive, does he?" "No," Keanu said carefully. "But he's alive, barely. And alone." There was a flicker in Matt's eyes, not pity, not longing, just a quiet flicker of something human that hadn't been lit in a long time. Keanu reached into his coat and pulled out the velvet box, placing it gently on the table. "This is yours to decide. Keep it, bury it, return it. But don't let it weigh you down without knowing what it really meant to him." Matt stared at it for a long moment. "You think people like that can change?" he asked finally. "I don't know," Keanu admitted. "But I've seen people regret. I've seen people break down and rebuild. And I've seen sons carry silence so long they forget their own voice." Matt picked up the box, then set it down again. "I don't need closure," he said. "I just need it to stop echoing." Keanu met his gaze. "Then maybe it's time to speak first." The diner's neon sign flickered behind them as they stepped into the cooler night air. Matt zipped up his jacket halfway, holding the velvet box like it might vanish if he let it go. Keanu didn't press, he simply walked beside him, the silence between them no longer awkward but necessary, like a breath taken before speaking something difficult. At the edge of the parking lot, Matt stopped and leaned against a lamppost, staring up at the stars barely visible through the city haze. "My mom used to say everyone carries something invisible," he said. "Some people carry pain, some carry hope, but the strongest ones carry both and still stand." Keanu nodded, "And some pass it down without meaning to." Matt gave a dry laugh. "Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of." He turned to Keanu. "What if I go to him and it ruins what little balance I've built? What if I hear something I can't unhear?" Keanu looked at him gently. "Then, at least it's no longer a ghost whispering it." Matt nodded slowly, the wind tugging at his hair. "You really think he's dying?" "Yes." Matt was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'll go. I'll listen. But not for him. For me. I want to know who he really was before the war, before the bottle, before the silence." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's more than fair." As they walked back to Keanu's car, Matt asked, "Do you think he'll even remember me?" Keanu opened the passenger door. "Sometimes the body forgets, but the soul never does." Matt climbed in, gripping the box tight. They drove in silence for a few minutes, passing dim gas stations, shuttered diners, fields lit only by moonlight. And then Matt spoke again, this time softer. "When I was little, I used to pretend he was on some secret mission, like a soldier who couldn't come home yet. That he was watching me from far away." He looked out the window. "I stopped pretending the day I found the eviction notice in my mom's purse." Keanu didn't reply. He didn't need to. Matt turned back. "But maybe I was right the first time. Maybe he did go missing, just not in the way I thought." And with that, the road ahead stretched wide and quiet. No longer a place to run from, but a path leading somewhere new. Keanu sat at his desk in the Foundation's office long after the city had gone quiet. In front of him was a photograph of the medal, its brass face catching the faint light from a nearby lamp. Next to it, he had written a single line at the top of a blank social post. "What if the things we carry aren't just memories, but maps?" He stared at it for a moment longer before typing out the story. Carefully, anonymously. He didn't use names, just pieces. A gas station, a velvet box, a boy who left without speaking, a war medal returned to someone who wasn't even looking for it. The story spoke of distance between fathers and sons, of the weight of silence, of the way grief sometimes gets inherited like furniture, chipped, heavy, and placed in rooms we don't know how to leave. He ended it with a question. "Have you ever found something that made you rethink your past?" Then he hit post. Within minutes, the comments began. "I still have my dad's dog tags, never met him, but sometimes I wear them when I need to feel brave. My mom kept a box of letters my brother wrote from Iraq. I only opened them after she passed. A medal like that saved my marriage. I found it in a pawn shop. It belonged to my wife's dad. She hadn't spoken to him in 15 years. Some stories were light. A faded photo, a ticket stub, a dried corsage from prom. Others were thunder. A man wrote, "I read my father's war journal last Christmas. I used to think he left us. Turns out he was trying to protect us from himself. He called his nightmares the fire that walks. I wish I'd known that before he died." Another said, "My dad was a ghost until I found a box of cassettes in the attic. He'd recorded lullabies before leaving for Vietnam. I didn't even know what his voice sounded like. Now I play them for my own son." Keanu sat back, stunned, not by the pain, but by the patterns. All these moments, all these fragments of identity scattered like breadcrumbs through time. Items misplaced, rediscovered, re-understood. He realized the post wasn't just being shared, it was being felt. The most powerful part? No one asked for help. They just wanted to remember. By the next morning, the post had been shared over 50,000 times. Sophia came into the office with a mug of coffee and a raised eyebrow. "You broke the comment section," she said, half smiling. Keanu pointed at the screen. "I didn't do anything. They did. All of them." They scrolled in silence. Story after story poured in. Some were only a few words. Found his medal in a drawer. He never said why he kept it. Others were pages long. Raw, unfiltered entries of rediscovered forgiveness or still buried pain. One woman wrote, "My father was a Navy cook. We thought he hated us, cold, distant, until I found his journals. Turns out he wrote poems every night about coming home. I framed one. It's the only thing on my wall." A teenage boy commented anonymously, "I stole a medal from my grandpa once. I was mad at him. I pawned it. He never said anything, just stared out the window more after that. I found it again last month. I'm working to buy it back." Keanu bookmarked that one. Maybe he could help, quietly. Another man posted, "My uncle wore his brother's Purple Heart in secret for 30 years. Said it kept him alive. I found it in a coffee can after he passed. I never even knew his brother existed." There was something universal in the stories. Not just the objects, but the feelings attached to them. Guilt, longing, bitterness, slowly softening into understanding. People weren't mourning medals. They were mourning meaning they hadn't been ready to face. Then, something new appeared. A local veteran advocacy group messaged the foundation. They wanted to start a community archive, a place where families could donate or display military relics, each with a story beside it. Not to glorify war, but to humanize it. Sophia looked up from the screen. "That's real impact," she said. Keanu nodded. "Let's help them get it off the ground." And still the comments kept coming. "My dad's war medal was lost in a move. I cried for weeks. I found my mom's bronze star. She'd never talked about the war. Now I wish I'd asked." Keanu sat still for a while, thinking of Matt and the look in his eyes, that tight, controlled pain. Maybe this wasn't about a medal at all. Maybe it was about a boy who'd been carrying silence his whole life, until he couldn't anymore. Later that afternoon, Keanu returned to the gas station. Matt was there again, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, his back to the pumps. Keanu stepped out of his car, holding a folded printout. Matt turned at the sound. "Back already?" Keanu nodded. "Didn't come to talk, just wanted to show you something." He handed Matt the page. It was a screenshot of one of the comments, printed out in black and white. Matt read it slowly. "My dad was a ghost. Until I read his war journal. I used to hate him. Now I just wish I'd asked him what haunted him." Matt held the paper tightly, jaw clenched. "I didn't ask either," he said quietly. "I didn't want to give him that chance." Keanu didn't reply. He just sat on the edge of the concrete curb near the pump, letting silence say what words couldn't. After a while, Matt sat down too. "You ever meet someone who didn't want to be found?" he asked. "Yes," Keanu said, "but most of the time they were just waiting for someone who wouldn't give up." Matt nodded, eyes on the paper in his hand. "If I go to him, I don't want it to be because someone talked me into it." Keanu didn't move. "Then let it be because you decided silence wasn't working anymore." The breeze stirred an old napkin near the curb. A truck pulled out in the distance. The world kept moving, unaware that something had just shifted in a young man's heart. Matt folded the paper carefully, slipped it into his back pocket. "Let me think about it," he said. "Take your time," Keanu replied. "But don't take too long. Some goodbyes don't wait forever." Matt stood up. "I'll let you know." Keanu didn't push. Just watched him walk back to the garage bay, the paper still clutched. For the first time, the boy didn't walk away to bury something. He walked away to carry it, maybe not for closure, but for the chance to rewrite an ending that had been silent for far too long. The road to the trailer wasn't paved. It curved through a patch of parched land, where dried grass cracked under tires and the air smelled faintly of rust and ash. Keanu drove slowly, his hand resting over the small velvet box on the passenger's seat, the metal inside shifting softly with every bump. He hadn't spoken much since he left the gas station. Even Sophia hadn't called. This was something he had to see through himself. The trailer appeared like something half forgotten, slumped into the dust, with its siding sun-bleached and peeling. One of the front steps was missing. A tarp flapped weakly over a cracked window. A sagging doghouse sat near the edge of the yard, beside a lean dog tied to a pole with a tattered rope. It didn't bark, just lifted its head, blinked slowly, and rested it back down as if it too had stopped expecting much from the world. Keanu stepped out of the car and approached the door. A handwritten note was taped to the middle panel in faded red marker. The letters were jagged, uneven. "Do not disturb. Seriously." He knocked anyway. Once, then again. No sound. A third knock, firmer. The lock clicked. The door cracked open 2 inches. Behind it, a man's face peeked through. Sun-weathered, unshaven, eyes sharp but heavy. He didn't speak. He just stared at Keanu. His gaze dropped to the box in Keanu's hand, then back to his face. Keanu said quietly, "It's about a medal. Your name's on it." The man's jaw twitched. Then, without a word, he opened the door wider and stepped back. The inside smelled like dust, dog fur, and something bitter left too long on the stove. The light bulb above flickered once and stayed dim. A couch with torn cushions sat opposite a coffee table, covered in old newspapers, pill bottles, and an empty whiskey glass. A portable oxygen tank leaned near the wall, capped and unused. The blinds were drawn tight. James Langston didn't offer a seat. He stood by the counter, arms crossed, watching Keanu like a man used to being judged. Keanu remained standing, holding out the box. "I didn't come to ask questions," he said. "Just thought maybe it belonged to someone who still mattered." James took a slow breath through his nose. "That medal's older than you are," he muttered. "I know," Keanu replied. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling something loose on the roof. Then James reached out, gently opened the box, and looked down at the medal. His thumb brushed the engraving, like it was a name he hadn't dared speak in years. James set the box down without closing it. His hands were steady, but something in his shoulders sagged. He didn't ask Keanu who brought the medal or why. He just walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and let the water run for a moment, before filling a chipped glass halfway. "You from the government?" he asked, not looking back. "No," Keanu said simply. "I'm just someone who met someone who didn't want you to be forgotten." James gave a dry laugh. "Forgotten? That's the best thing that ever happened to me." Keanu didn't argue. He just stood still, letting the silence settle. James drank the water slowly. "That medal," he said after a while. "They gave me that after Hugh. Said I held the line when we got overrun. Funny thing is, I don't remember doing much. I just didn't run fast enough." Keanu looked toward the old framed photo on the wall. 2 soldiers, one of them James, younger, arm around another man, both grinning in the sun. The glass was cracked, the frame barely hanging on a bent nail. James followed his eyes. "That's Ron. He's the one who saved me. I got the medal, he got a flag over his casket. You tell me how that's fair." He walked back to the table, sat slowly, his joints stiff. "I came back, got married, got scared, left. I'd like to say it was more complicated than that, but it wasn't." Keanu moved toward the couch and sat. Not too close. "I have a son," James said, his voice lower, or had. He was 5, never saw him again. "I figured that was for the best." "It wasn't," Keanu said quietly. James looked at him sharply. "I met him," Keanu added. "He's not a boy anymore." For the first time, something in James's face broke. "You met Matthew?" Keanu nodded. James leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "Is he okay?" He's working, independent, tough. Said he didn't want anything from you, just thought you deserved that back." He gestured toward the medal. James swallowed. "Did he say anything else?" Keanu paused. "He said he didn't come from you, he came from his mom's strength." James let out a long breath, half laugh, half sigh. "That's fair." They sat in silence again. Then James said, almost to himself, "I didn't think anyone would remember. Least of all, him." Keanu said, "He didn't forget, he just hurt." James nodded slowly. "So did I." Keanu glanced toward the door, then back at the man hunched at the table, hands weathered from years of labor, grief, or both. The air inside the trailer was still, but the weight of years not spoken of pressed down like humidity before a storm. James broke the quiet. "He was just a kid. I was supposed to protect him, but I couldn't even protect myself. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw that kid in the jungle, not Matthew. Me." Keanu understood more than he let on. He leaned forward slightly. "James, he doesn't want anything from you. But you should know, I think he still has questions only you can answer." James rubbed his palms together like he was trying to scrub something off. "And what if I don't have answers? What if all I've got are regrets?" "Sometimes," Keanu said gently, "just showing up is the answer." James looked at him, eyes glassy. "I'm not strong enough to fix everything." "No one's asking you to," Keanu replied. "But you might be strong enough to sit across from him, and that's more than you think." There was a long pause before James gave the smallest of nods. "I don't have much time." "I know," Keanu said. James looked back at the medal, still sitting in the open box. "You ever wonder why people keep things they hate?" Keanu didn't answer. James continued, "I kept that medal not because I was proud. I kept it because it was proof I wasn't always what I became." Keanu stood. "Then maybe it's time someone else heard that." James looked up. "You really think he'd come here?" "No," Keanu said. "I think he's waiting for a reason to try. You don't have to make it easy, just don't make it impossible." James was quiet for a long time before finally nodding toward the photo on the wall. "If he comes, tell him I'll be here. I don't expect forgiveness, but I won't run." Keanu walked to the door, hand resting for a second on the frame. "I'll tell him." He stepped outside into the dusty light, the dog at the edge of the yard still watching him, tail swishing once. Inside, behind the closed door, the silence returned. But this time, it felt different. Keanu stepped inside the trailer, and the first thing he noticed wasn't the silence. It was the weight of everything unspoken. The air smelled like stale tobacco, old wool, and time. A dog barked weakly outside, tied near a stack of firewood, but inside, it was just the two of them. The walls were more museum than home. Yellowed clippings from the war, medals pinned like ghosts to a corkboard, faded snapshots of men in uniforms. But no photos of family, no wedding pictures, no drawings from a child. Just a single image on the far wall, James Langston, young and serious, kneeling beside a fellow soldier with a grin that hadn't survived the war. James limped over to a wooden chair and gestured to a recliner that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Keanu sat quietly. James studied him with tired, narrowed eyes. "You said something about a medal," he muttered. Keanu took it out from his coat and opened the velvet box. James didn't move. He stared at it like it was something he'd already buried. "I got that outside Pleiku," he said eventually. "Ambush. Mud, gunfire, screaming. I dragged 3 of them out of the ditch before the second blast hit. 1 didn't make it. My leg's still full of metal. Rest of me too." He let out a laugh, dry and humorless. "You don't come back from something like that. You land. That's all. Land with less than you left with." Keanu waited, offering silence, not solutions. James rubbed his temples, elbows on his knees. "Rachel, my wife. She tried, honest to God she did. I couldn't sleep. couldn't hold a job, couldn't stop drinking long enough to remember what normal felt like. She begged me to get help. I slammed the door. He looked up. Matt? He was 5, playing with army men on the rug. I walked past him, opened the door, and kept walking, never looked back. Keanu's hands tightened on the box. I didn't leave because I didn't love him, James whispered. I left because I didn't want to ruin what was left of him. The fan creaked above them. The room felt suspended in stillness. I saved 3 men that day, James said again, quieter now. But coming home, I lost everything. Keanu sat forward, arms resting lightly on his knees. He didn't speak right away. He just let the quiet linger, let the confession breathe. James stared into the distance, like he was still seeing the dust of that old battlefield, or maybe just the pieces of a life he couldn't glue back together. Do you regret it? Keanu finally asked, his voice low but steady. James didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into a tin on the shelf beside him and pulled out an old cigarette. He didn't light it, just held it between his fingers like a placeholder for the words he hadn't said yet. Every damn day, James said, but regret's a luxury. You gotta have hope to feed it. I ran out of that a long time ago. Keanu studied him for a moment. He's alive, you know. James's hand trembled slightly. I figured. I called once, years back. Some woman answered. I hung up. Thought maybe it was better he didn't hear my voice. Keanu nodded slowly. He found your medal. He cleaned it. Tried to return it quietly. James blinked. Once. Why? I don't think even he knows, Keanu replied. But I saw him, and I think he's more like you than he wants to admit. A thin, bitter smile cracked James's face. That poor kid. Keanu leaned back in the old recliner. He doesn't want anything from you. No apologies, no fixes. He needed to not carry it alone. James looked down at his hands. The skin was weathered, the veins raised, the fingernails lined with dirt. I don't have anything left to give him. Keanu shook his head. Sometimes just showing up is enough. Silence filled the room again, but this time it felt less like weight and more like space. Room for something else to take shape. Does he hate me? James asked, the words almost a whisper. No, Keanu said. He's angry. He's confused, but hate? No. If he hated you, he would have thrown that medal in a river. Instead, he handed it to me. James closed his eyes for a long moment. I thought maybe he'd be better off not knowing me. Keanu's voice was gentle. He's grown up not knowing you. Maybe it's time he decides for himself. James didn't reply, but something about the way his shoulders eased told Keanu what he needed to know. The door was cracked. Now it was up to Matt whether or not to walk through it. James finally stood, his knees cracked under the weight of too many years and too many miles walked in silence. He shuffled to a drawer, rummaged through papers, rubber bands, and receipts until he found what he was looking for. A photo, creased down the middle, edges yellowed. He handed it to Keanu. That was him, 5 years old. I took it before I left for a welding job in Reno. Never made it back. Keanu studied the photo. A small boy in oversized rain boots holding a toy airplane. A smile that barely understood the ache behind the man holding the camera. He still looks like that, Keanu murmured. Not on the outside, but inside, that kid's still waiting. James looked away, jaw clenched. I missed every birthday, every scraped knee, every nightmare. What kind of man asks for a second chance when he didn't even show up for the first? The kind who's still alive, Keanu said. James sank back into the chair, the photo still in Keanu's hand. I don't know what to say to him, he whispered. You don't have to say everything, Keanu replied. Just start with the truth, and let him decide what to do with it. James stared at the floor, then at the wall filled with medals, unit flags, and fading photos. Ghosts of men he'd saved, faces of those who didn't come home. I told myself I didn't deserve anything better than this, James said. That this trailer, this quiet, was all I had coming. Keanu rose. Maybe that was true once. But now, there's a boy out there who wants to know if he came from something worth carrying. James looked up. And if I disappoint him? You won't, Keanu said. You already did. Now's your chance to show him something else. James didn't speak again, but he didn't protest when Keanu gently laid the photo on the kitchen table and said, I'll bring him by, if you want. James nodded, once, and that was enough. As Keanu walked out into the late afternoon sun, he glanced back. The screen door creaked open, and James was standing there, backlit by the low light, hand resting on the frame like he wasn't sure how to let go, or how to hold on. Keanu didn't wait. He didn't have to. Keanu returned the next morning, the medal still in his coat pocket, its weight no lighter with time. James Langston was sitting on the porch, same flannel shirt, same silent stare toward the horizon, as if watching a battlefield only he could see. Keanu didn't say much at first. He just sat beside him, nodding at the sunrise. For several minutes, there was nothing but the creak of the wind against the rusted porch swing. Then, slowly, James reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered shoebox. Didn't think I'd ever open this again, he muttered, handing it over. Keanu took it gently, setting it on the table between them. The lid came off like an exhale. Inside, rows of sealed envelopes, each yellowed with time, each marked in the same trembling handwriting. To Matthew, age 6. To Matthew, age 7. To Matthew, age 8. And on, up to 19. Keanu stared, stunned. You wrote to him every year? James nodded, eyes fixed on his boots. Didn't know where to send them. Didn't want to show up just to wreck him again. Keanu lifted one. The envelope was soft, fragile, like it had waited too long to be read. He asked softly, Can I? James hesitated, then gave a single nod. Keanu opened the letter slowly, like unfolding something sacred. The paper was lined and faded, written in blocky penmanship. It wasn't long. Matt, this year I tried to quit drinking. Didn't last long, but I looked at your baby photo today. You had these big eyes, full of questions. I remember holding you once, your hand wrapped around one finger. Felt like I was supposed to be strong enough for both of us. I wasn't, but I still remember the way you looked at me like I mattered. I hope someone in your life gave you that feeling. I miss you. Damn. Keanu finished reading, unable to look up. His throat tightened, but he said it anyway. He doesn't hate you. He just never heard your side. James didn't respond. He just looked away, wiping his cheek with a sleeve as if it were sweat. In that moment, Keanu saw it. Not the soldier, not the failure. Just a man who had lost everything except memory. And memory, it turned out, was heavier than war. Keanu folded the letter with care and placed it gently back into the envelope. He didn't need to say anything yet. The silence between them had already begun to speak. James stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. His hands, rough and knotted from both time and damage, gripped the edges of the porch bench like it was the only stable thing he had left. There's more, James said finally, voice gravel-scraped and thin. He reached into the shoebox and pulled out another envelope. It was thicker than the rest. When he handed it to Keanu, he didn't let go immediately. This one was for when he turned 18, he said. That was the year I almost drove up to find him. Keanu opened it slowly. Inside was a longer letter, shaky but fierce. James had poured himself onto the page. It wasn't polished, it wasn't pretty, but it was real. Matt, you're a man now, and I don't know if I have the right to call myself your father. I left your mother when I should have stayed. I disappeared when you needed me. But you should know something. The day I walked out, it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I was afraid I'd become the war I came home from. I didn't want that man raising you. I figured it'd be better to vanish. But the thing about vanishing is, You still feel everything. Every missed birthday, every holiday, every time you probably asked, why didn't he come back? I don't have answers that make it okay. I just have this. I never stopped loving you. Not once. And if you ever read this, I hope you're okay. Not perfect, just okay. That would be enough for me. Dad. Keanu's hand trembled slightly as he finished. He couldn't remember the last time a letter, ink on a page, had cut so deeply. James didn't ask how it sounded. He didn't look over. He just whispered, I wrote that in the dark, sitting in this same spot. Power was out. Thought I'd die before the sun came up. Keanu looked over at him, heart pulling tight in his chest. But you didn't. James gave a hollow smile. No, I didn't. The sun had climbed higher now, casting the light across the yard, over the gravel, the old truck, the cracked bird bath. It warmed the porch wood beneath their feet. James Langston sat still, but something inside him had shifted. The box between them wasn't just filled with paper. It was filled with time, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance. Keanu rested the letter back into the box, closing it like something sacred. James didn't stop him. His eyes were red now, not from crying, but from holding too much in for too long. I don't know what to do with all that, James muttered, gesturing toward the stack of unopened envelopes. I kept thinking, maybe one day he'd come looking for me, but I never really believed he would. Keanu nodded slowly. He didn't come looking to reconnect. He came to return the medal. James's jaw tensed again. He looked down. Of course he did. Probably couldn't stand the thought of holding anything that came from me. That's not what I saw, Keanu said. He didn't want to be found, but he didn't throw it away either. He placed it in my glove box, like he wanted someone to understand why it mattered. James let out a breath, half laugh, half exhale of pain. He's his mother's son. She was the kind of woman who believed even broken things had value. She was right, Keanu replied. They sat in silence. The dog barked once in the distance, then settled again. Keanu glanced at the box. He doesn't know about these letters, James. If you let me, I'd like to show him. Let him read your words. James shook his head at first, then looked out over the dry grass, squinting into the sun like a man trying to see the past from the edge of the present. I don't know if I'm ready to face him. You don't have to, Keanu said. Not today. But your words, they've waited long enough. James hesitated, then reached for the top envelope, the very first one, postmarked 15 years ago. He held it for a long moment, then slid it toward Keanu. That one. Start with that. Keanu took it gently, nodding. You know, James added quietly. The hardest part isn't the guilt, it's realizing I let silence speak for me. Keanu stood. Then let's break that silence. He placed the envelope in his pocket, not as a delivery, but as a bridge. As he walked back toward his car, the gravel crunching under his boots, James called out, just once, tell him. I didn't stop loving him, even when I stopped knowing how. Keanu turned, hand over his heart, I will. And with that, the box stayed behind. But the message, after years of waiting, finally started its journey home. The envelope sat between them on the diner table like it carried a bomb. Matt hadn't touched his food, and Keanu hadn't said much since placing the stack of letters there. Matt stared at the faded handwriting, the slanted letters, the way the M in Matthew dipped low, as if it had lost its strength halfway through. Bill wrote them, Matt asked, voice flat. Keanu nodded. Every birthday. Matt scoffed, but there was no anger, only tiredness. Funny how people remember birthdays when they forget every other day. Keanu didn't argue, he just sat with it. Matt reached out, then stopped. Words don't fix what silence built, he muttered. They don't, Keanu agreed quietly. But sometimes they break the wall enough to let someone breathe. Matt's fingers hovered again, then pulled away. He had a choice. He made it. Keanu looked at him for a long moment. "So do you." Silence filled the booth again. Outside, cars came and went. People lived ordinary lives. Inside, a father's last thread of hope rested in paper. Finally, Matt reached for the top letter. He didn't open it, just held it. The paper was softer than he expected, as if time had worn it into something fragile. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why does he care now?" Keanu didn't rush the answer. He leaned forward, steady. "Because he's dying. And because not a day went by that he didn't wonder if he still existed in your memory." Matt swallowed hard. Keanu took one letter from the pile and opened it gently. He began to read aloud, softly. "To the boy I never stopped seeing in my dreams." Matt froze. His hands tightened, his head dropped forward, and for the first time his breath hitched. Keanu placed the rest of the letters in front of him. "He's not asking for forgiveness. He just wants you to know he was still your father, even when he couldn't be." Matt didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it was barely audible. "If I go, I don't want him to think it means everything's okay." Keanu nodded. "Then don't say it's okay. Just let him know you're real. And listening." Matt looked up, tears rimmed but not falling. "You think he deserves that?" Keanu said nothing for a moment, then replied, "I think you do." The next morning, Keanu waited outside the garage. The air still smelled of oil and burnt rubber. Matt stepped out with grease on his palms and exhaustion in his eyes. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded at Keanu. He had the letters in his jacket pocket. Keanu fell into step beside him as they walked down the road. It wasn't a conversation. It was gravity pulling two people forward. They stopped at a small park bench across from a construction site. Workers moved steel, shouting directions, building something new out of the ruins of an old diner that had burned down. "I used to think about torching that trailer," Matt said suddenly. Keanu didn't flinch. "Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I'd picture it going up in flames. All of it. His uniform, his medals, him." He paused. "I thought that would make it easier, but it never did." Keanu waited. Matt pulled the top envelope from his pocket and opened it. He read in silence, lips moving, breath held. About halfway through, his fingers began to shake. "This one's from when I turned 11, he said. "He talks about a bicycle I never got. He imagined giving it to me himself." Matt laughed once, bitter. "We were living in a shelter. My mom couldn't afford cereal, let alone a bike." Keanu said nothing, just let the pain speak its own language. "But he remembered," Matt's voice cracked. "He remembered." He folded the letter and slipped it back into his coat. Another silence, this one softer. "I don't know if I can look him in the eye without yelling," Matt admitted. "Or walking away." "You can do both," Keanu said. "Yell, walk away, come back. It's your turn now." Matt looked over, eyes fierce. "I don't want pity." "You won't get it from him," Keanu said. "He's already buried himself in it." Matt looked back toward the construction site. "What if I just want to hear him say it? That he was wrong?" "Then ask," Keanu said simply. "You may only get one chance." Matt nodded slowly. "I don't forgive him," he said. "You don't have to," Keanu replied. "Just meet him as the man you've become, not the boy he left." That landed. Matt closed his eyes. "Okay." Keanu tilted his head. "Okay to what?" Matt exhaled. "Okay to hearing him once." They drove in silence. Keanu didn't turn on the radio. The road between the gas station and James Langston's trailer felt longer than usual, though it only stretched 28 miles. Every turn, every signpost, was a step towards something that might break or mend. A reunion that had no script. Matt kept the letters in his lap. He didn't look at them. He didn't say much either. Only once, when they passed a sign for a military surplus store, he muttered, "I used to hate the smell of canvas." Keanu nodded, understanding more than he said. When they pulled up to the trailer, the dog barked once, then fell quiet. The wind pushed against the thin metal walls, rattling them like bones. James was already outside, sitting on the porch, a thermos in his hand, as if he'd been waiting, without knowing for what. Matt didn't move at first. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're not here to fix him," he said. "You're here to free yourself." That helped. Matt stepped out of the car. He crossed the dirt path alone. Each step kicked up a bit of dust, but he didn't pause. James looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment, both of them looked like boys again, each searching for something the world had stolen. Matt stopped at the bottom of the steps. "You wrote to me," he said. James nodded slowly. "Every year. You never sent them." "I was afraid," James admitted, "that I'd already done too much damage." Matt pulled out the stack of letters, held them up. "Days, they weren't enough," he said. James looked down. "But they were something," Matt added. "And maybe that's a start." Silence. Then James stood, slower than he used to, but steady. "I never stopped seeing you," he said, "even when I tried." Matt blinked hard. "Then stop looking for the boy you left. He's gone. I'm here now." James swallowed. "I want to know him." Matt stared at him. The anger was still there, but it didn't rise. He climbed the steps, and for the first time in 15 years, father and son stood on the same piece of earth, breathing the same air, with nothing but truth between them. Keanu remained by the car, watching, not interfering, because some decisions are sacred, and this was one of them. The sky was beginning to turn, that slow gray that hinted at a long night ahead. Keanu parked the car a few yards from the trailer, engine still running. Matt didn't move. He sat in the passenger seat with his shoulders stiff and his hands clenched on his lap. Keanu didn't rush him. Instead, he waited, letting the stillness speak for them both. After 5 minutes, Matt finally said, "This is stupid." "Maybe," Keanu said quietly, "but sometimes the only way forward is through." Matt opened the car door and stepped out. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he walked toward the trailer, slowly, like every step might break the ground beneath him. Keanu followed at a distance, saying nothing. This wasn't his moment. It never had been. At the top of the creaky wooden steps, Matt paused. The door was shut. A faded curtain fluttered inside the window. Keanu could see the shadow of a man just beyond it. Then, after a long hesitation, the door opened. James Langston stood in the frame. His face looked older now than even a week ago. Illness had hollowed his eyes, but his jaw was still set. He didn't look afraid, but he did look unsure. Matt didn't move. James finally spoke. "You're taller than I remember." Matt's jaw tightened. Then he answered, "You look exactly like I feared, but I'm still here." That was it. No hugs, no breakdowns, just 2 sentences heavy with the weight of years lost. Jane stepped back without another word, holding the door open. Matt walked in. Keanu stayed on the porch, heart steady but heavy. He didn't need to hear the rest, not yet. Inside, the air was quiet. No television, no ticking clock, just breath and the occasional creak of the floor. Matt sat in the only other chair besides the recliner. Across from him, his father sat slowly, coughing once, covering his mouth with the back of a trembling hand. They didn't speak for a while. Finally, James said, "I was 21 when they gave me that medal. I didn't think I deserved it then either." Matt nodded once. "I didn't come for the medal." James looked down. "I figured." Matt took a slow breath. "I came to hear if any of it mattered." James met his eyes, and for the first time in decades, there was no war between them, only wounds. James sat back in his chair, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the blanket across his knees. He didn't look like a hero. He didn't even look like a father. Just a man who had carried too much for too long and never learned how to set it down. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, You want to know if it mattered? Matt said nothing, but the silence was its own answer. James exhaled. I used to picture you. Every year. I didn't know what kind of music you'd like, what sports you'd play, but I used to talk to you. In my head. At night. Matt looked down, his voice rough. You could have picked up a phone. I know. You could have come to the funeral. James flinched, his voice caught. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I didn't think I deserved to be near her. Not after what I did to you both. Matt's fingers curled into fists. She died thinking you didn't care. I did, James whispered, every day. But caring without courage is nothing. They sat in that stillness again, this time not from fear, but exhaustion. Like both men had been holding something sharp inside and were finally letting it go. Matt reached into his jacket and slowly took out one of the letters Keanu had brought. He held it up. I read this one. James nodded. You said, I hope you're strong like your mom. Matt swallowed. I was. I believe you, James said quietly. Another silence. Then Matt asked, what happened to you? James looked up. His voice was raspy but steady. I came back from the jungle thinking I could just go back to life. But it didn't fit anymore. I didn't fit. The nightmares, the noise, the smell of diesel and blood, it stayed. And I started drinking. Then I got angry. Then I ran. I kept telling myself I'd come back once I was fixed. Matt's voice cracked. You never came back. No, James said. I never did. And I've regretted it every day since. Matt looked at his hands. I hated you. James didn't argue. You had every right. Matt looked up slowly. I don't know what this is supposed to be. I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking for that, James said. Just this moment. Matt nodded, and for now, that was enough. The fire crackled softly in the metal drum outside the trailer, casting flickering shadows on the walls behind them. Keanu stood a short distance away, hands in his coat pockets, not wanting to intrude. But he didn't leave either. This wasn't a moment for fixing. It was a moment for being. Matt shifted in his seat. Why did you keep the medal? James looked toward the shelf where it now sat again. Because it was the one thing I earned. Not given, not inherited, just survived for. Matt nodded slowly. You know I didn't want it, right? I figured, James said, but I hoped someday you might understand what it cost. I think I'm starting to, Matt said. Not just the war, all of it. James blinked hard. You remind me of her. Matt smiled faintly. She was louder. James chuckled. Yeah, she didn't let me get away with anything. They both stared at the fire again. Words had done enough for now. The silence was no longer sharp. It settled between them like a blanket. Worn, thin, but still warm. James reached for something beside his chair. A photograph, bent at the corners. He handed it to Matt. It was a picture of a young boy in overalls holding a paper flag. Matt didn't remember the day, but the way James looked at the photo told him he did. I used to carry this in my jacket, James said. Everywhere. Matt held it gently. You look different. So do you. Matt looked over at his father. Older, slower, but no longer a ghost. Just a man who stayed too long in his own silence. Do you have any more of those letters? Matt asked. James nodded. A box full. I want to read them. James looked stunned, as if that single sentence had undone decades of silence. Not tonight, Matt added, but soon. James nodded again. Whenever you're ready. Keanu finally stepped forward, not to end the moment, but to gently draw it to a close. It's getting late. Matt stood. James did too, slower, but with a new steadiness. No hug, no promises. But something else passed between them. Matt extended his hand. James took it. Two fingers curled in, two men holding on. Not to the past, but to whatever came next. The video went live on a Tuesday morning. Quietly, without hype, no names, no dramatics, just a title: The Son Who Returned the Medal. It was the story of two men, a fractured timeline, and one object that refused to be forgotten. In less than 12 hours, the views climbed into the thousands. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered, it was the comments. Keanu had included a question beneath the video. Has someone in your life broken your trust, and still you wanted to know them again? Tell us below. The first few responses were brief, quiet. Then the dam broke. A man in Arkansas wrote, "My father walked out when I was 7. I hated him. Last month, I found an old voicemail on my mom's answering machine. Him singing me happy birthday. He never called again. But that one recording changed how I remembered him." A woman from Ohio shared, "My sister stole from me for years. But she was also the one who sat by my hospital bed when no one else did. I forgave her, quietly, just by holding her hand." And then came the message that made Keanu stop scrolling. It was from a woman named Eleanor, a widow. Her comment read, "My husband never spoke about Vietnam. He shook in his sleep, drank in silence, and closed every door softly, as if he was afraid the world would break. Our kids hated him for it. But I knew. I always knew. Thank you for giving someone like him a second ending." Keanu sat back in his chair and reread it. Not once, not twice, but 4 times. Because Eleanor wasn't the only one. There were fathers begging for the chance to write their own letters. Sons who said they understood, finally, what silence costs. One message simply said, "I watched this with my dad. We didn't talk, we just sat there. And for once, that was enough." And that, Keanu thought, was what healing sometimes looked like. Not a speech, not a reunion with flowers, just a quiet screen, and 2 hearts remembering how to listen. By the second day, the comment section had become a living journal, a place not just for watching, but for remembering, releasing, rebuilding. One comment read, "My mom raised me alone. I used to curse my dad's name until I saw his photograph in uniform at a VFW hall. He died when I was 6. No one ever told me. I only hated a ghost. I wish I'd known." Another viewer wrote, "My brother stopped talking to me after I came out. But when my apartment burned down, he was the first one standing outside the shelter. He didn't say sorry, he just said, 'You cold?' Sometimes that's all an apology needs to be." The video had tapped into something deeper than just the story of Matt and James. It had peeled open a wound so many carried quietly. The ache of abandonment, the fear of reconnection, and the hunger to believe that redemption might still be possible. Even in the final chapter. Veterans posted photos of their own medals, not to brag, but to say, "I'm still here." Others posted pictures of letters they'd kept in shoeboxes, unopened for decades. A woman held up a card from her mother that simply read, "I tried." It had arrived too late, but she still framed it. And then came a comment from a teenager. "My dad hurt us, bad, but he was also the one who taught me how to change a tire. He's gone now. I still remember the tire." That line echoed through hundreds of replies. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't loud. It's not even full. It's just enough. Just enough to move forward. Just enough to keep the memory without drowning in it. Keanu scrolled past a message that said, "I don't know how to reach my son, but I'm going to try, because of this." And then another. "To the father I haven't spoken to in 10 years, I saw this. I'm ready if you are." The comment had no tag, no name, but someone out there might read it, might recognize the timing, the voice, and maybe, just maybe, pick up the phone. Sophia printed out hundreds of the messages, pinning them to the foundation wall. Veterans, sons, daughters, and estranged siblings, whole histories shared in a few broken lines. Keanu stood quietly before them one evening, reading until his eyes blurred. The hallway had become something sacred, not just a space for stories, but for what had never been said. One note simply read, "Miss my graduation, miss my wedding, but he called last week, and I let him speak." Another scribbled in uneven handwriting, "I was the father who left. I saw this video. I packed a bag. I'm heading to her city tomorrow." It wasn't just the reconciliation stories that struck people. It was the honesty in the ones that still hung in the balance, the ones that hadn't found their ending yet. Someone wrote, "This didn't make me forgive him, but it made me wonder if he ever tried, and that's more than I gave him credit for." Another user shared, "Sometimes we heal by telling the truth out loud, even if they're not around to hear it." Then came a message unlike the others. It was short, just one sentence. "James Langston was my uncle. I didn't know he had a son." It was followed by a private message, details about James as a younger man, about the things he loved before the war. The niece said she'd be willing to visit if James wanted. The story was rippling out, not just into homes but into history, pulling up pieces long buried beneath grief, anger, or simply forgetting. Later that night, Matt visited the comment section himself. He didn't write much, just 4 words. "Thank you for trying." And with that, Section 11 closed, not on a resolution, but on a rising tide of honesty, of effort, of people learning to see each other again, not as the worst thing they'd ever done, but as the full story they still might become. The next morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that wraps around two people when neither knows what to say and both know exactly what matters. Matt showed up again, not with questions, not with answers, just presence. James sat at the small table near the front window of the trailer. A pot of coffee brewed behind him, weak but hot. Matt took the chair across from him without a word. For a while they just stared at their hands, at the space between them, at the memories they didn't know how to handle. Then James stood up, crossed to the old bookshelf, and pulled out the small velvet box that had started it all. He walked it over, slowly, with both hands. "Your mother used to say it was the only thing I ever brought back that didn't scare her," James said quietly. Matt looked down at the box, then up at his father. "I don't need it on a shelf," James said. "I just need you to know why it mattered." He opened it and pushed it across the table. Matt took the box, running his thumb gently across the brass. "What does it mean to you?" he asked. James hesitated. "It means I did one thing right," he said finally. "One day, in the middle of hell, I didn't run. I pulled 3 men out of a minefield. I heard my own bones break, and I still dragged them out. And for one moment, I thought maybe I wasn't the worst version of myself." Matt swallowed hard. "And after that?" he asked. James stared down at the table. "I couldn't hold on to it, not the good, not anything. I buried everything in silence. Including you." Matt didn't respond right away. He held the box, studying the metal like it might give him a map. Then he slid it into his backpack. Back at the apartment, Matt placed the metal beside the stack of unopened letters on his desk. The letters he hadn't been ready to read. Until now. He reached for the one on top. Birthday, age 6, a drawing of a superhero with a boy on his shoulders. He set it back down. "I'll read them," he said aloud. "1 a day." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something else, a beginning. They didn't say goodbye that afternoon. He said something better. "Let's see about tomorrow." The next day, James stood outside his trailer, leaning against the railing with a tin cup of coffee in his hand. The sun was low, streaking gold across the dirt, warming his lined face. A pickup truck pulled up. Matt stepped out. No announcement, just the crunch of gravel and the quiet click of a door shutting. He held a small plastic bag in one hand. "Figured you probably don't eat much that isn't canned," Matt said. James grinned faintly. "That's accurate." Matt handed him the bag. Inside were fresh eggs, a loaf of bread, and a tiny jar of strawberry jam. "I'm not much of a cook," Matt said, "but I make a mean grilled sandwich." James nodded, opening the screen door. "Let's see if the stove still works." They moved around the cramped kitchen slowly. Matt spread butter, James found a pan. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It had softened, turned into something useful, like insulation, like glue. As the smell of grilled bread filled the trailer, James reached for a folded napkin from the counter and placed it on the tiny kitchen table. He glanced toward the open window, then back at Matt. "I started writing again," he said. Matt looked up from the stove. "Letters?" James shook his head. "A journal, about everything I never told anyone. Stuff I saw, stuff I did, stuff I dreamed about and still dream about." Matt hesitated. "What are you going to do with it?" "I don't know," James said. "But I'm writing it down, and maybe when I'm gone, you'll read it, or maybe someone else will, so the silence stops with me." They ate their sandwiches slowly. Neither said much, but Matt noticed that James looked steadier, like the weight on his shoulders was still there, but now he knew someone else could see it. After lunch, they sat outside on rusted lawn chairs. Matt pulled out another envelope. He'd already read the first letter that morning. This was the second, age 7. "I forgot how much I wanted you to teach me how to ride a bike," Matt said, half laughing, half sighing. "You even drew a picture of a helmet." James chuckled. "You always hated helmets." "I still do." They shared a long look. No apology, no declaration. Just two men sitting under a blue sky, remembering things that never happened and learning to live with the fact that they still mattered. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, Matt stood and stretched. James followed, slower but steady. The air had cooled, and the dry wind tugged at the edges of the porch. Neither man seemed eager to leave or rush what had settled between them. Something tentative, something beginning. James opened the screen door and returned with a small wooden box. It was worn but clean. The lid bore a carved eagle, wings wide, as if ready to lift. "This belonged to my father," James said, handing it to Matt. "He was in Korea. Never spoke a word about it." Matt opened the box. Inside were a few keepsakes, a faded patch, a dog tag, and one photograph. It showed a man with a thick mustache holding a baby in his arms. Behind them, an old pickup and a tire swing. "That's you?" Matt asked. James nodded. "And that's my dad. He never showed up either." Matt studied the image, then looked back at James. "But you kept this." "I did," James said. "And now, maybe you will." Matt closed the box gently and held it to his chest. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, with a quiet voice, he asked, "Do you think it's possible to become what you never had?" James gave a small smile. "I think it's the only way anything changes." Matt stepped forward and, for the first time, wrapped his arms around his father. It wasn't tight, it wasn't long, but it was real, and that was enough. When Matt pulled away, he looked toward the open sky and said, "See you tomorrow?" James nodded, eyes misty. "I'd like that." Matt got in his truck, but before driving off, he rolled down the window. "I'll bring the letters with me next time. Maybe you can fill in the blanks between them." "I've got plenty," James replied. "Too many, probably. Then we'll start with one." The truck rumbled to life and rolled down the dusty path, disappearing into the soft glow of twilight. James stood on the porch until the sound faded. Then he looked down at his hands. They were trembling, not from fear, but from the flood of something long dormant. Hope. Inside, on the desk where the letters had been, only the metal remained. He placed it back in its box, closed the lid, and whispered, "It's yours now, Matt." And for the first time in decades, James Langston sat down and began to write again, not to explain the past, but to build the future. The morning was soft, with light fog curling through the old oaks that framed the Veterans Memorial Park. Keanu pulled into the small gravel lot just after sunrise, his boots crunching quietly beneath him as he stepped out. Ahead, two figures stood near the far edge of the clearing, beside a blank cement foundation. James Langston, older and thinner but upright, was resting his hand on the arm of a newly delivered wooden bench. Matt stood beside him, not speaking, but not leaving either. The bench was simple, no polish or fanfare, just sturdy wood, curved slightly at the back, supported by clean iron legs. What caught Keanu's eye was the small plaque embedded along the top slat of the seat. It read, "For those who returned home," silently. The words hit deeper than any speech. They said what years of articles, protests, and documentaries could never quite express. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrench. Without being asked, Matt knelt beside him. Together, father and son worked in quiet rhythm to anchor the bolts on either side. It wasn't about efficiency. It was about presence. Keanu didn't interrupt. He simply watched. Watched the way Matt held the bolts still while James tightened. Watched the slight shake in James's hands. Watched the way Matt adjusted the last bolt to sit level. Something that only mattered if you planned to sit here often. When they were done, James stood back and brushed his palms together. His breath fogged in the cool air. "This is good," he said. Matt nodded, "Yeah." They sat down slowly, the wood creaking just slightly under their weight. Keanu joined them, choosing to sit at the far end, giving them space without removing himself entirely. For a while, no one said anything. The silence wasn't awkward. It felt necessary. A small group of older veterans walked by on the path and gave James a subtle nod. He returned it. No introductions, just recognition. James leaned back, eyes closed briefly, as if trying to remember something from far away. When he opened them again, his gaze drifted out toward the flagpole at the center of the park. 38 years, he muttered, and this is the first thing I've built that stayed. Matt looked over, the corners of his mouth tight but softening. "Maybe it's not the bench," he said. James turned toward him slowly. "Maybe not." The fog began to lift. Sunlight pooled on the plaque like it had been waiting all morning. Matt leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers loosely laced. "You know, when I was a kid, I used to draw pictures of you." His voice was low, almost like he was embarrassed to say it. James didn't move, but his eyes shifted toward his son. "I'd make you a firefighter, a pilot, a race car driver. I didn't know what you really did. I just knew you weren't there. So I made up something better than nothing." James took a slow breath, letting the words settle between them. "I tried to write," he said. "Letters, cards, every year. But each one felt smaller than what I owed. I got them," Matt said. "Eventually, Keanu brought them. I've been reading them one a day, just like I promised." There was a pause before James said, "I didn't think you would." "I didn't think I would either," Matt admitted. "But now I wait for them. Each one. It's like finding a missing page in a book I was born into, but never understood." James reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded photograph. The edges were worn, corners creased. He handed it to Matt. It was an old Polaroid, a young James in uniform standing beside a hospital bed where a baby was swaddled in blue. "That's you," James said. "You were maybe 6 hours old. I was on leave for exactly 3 days. I held you once. That's the only picture I kept through everything. War, rehab, shelters, that stayed in my boot for years." Matt stared at the photo, blinking hard. "Why didn't you send it?" James shrugged, looking down at his hands. "Because I didn't think I had the right." Keanu watched the exchange in silence, heart pounding. There was something sacred about it, raw, without performance. Matt cleared his throat. "Well, I think it's time it found a frame." James let out a quiet, surprised laugh. His shoulders, always tight with decades of grief, dropped just slightly. They sat again in silence, not from the lack of things to say, but because there was nothing urgent to fix anymore. Some bridges take years to burn, others take just as long to rebuild. A breeze passed through the trees, stirring the leaves along the walking path. A boy rode past on his bicycle and waved. James raised a hand and nodded. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. Matt looked toward Keanu. "Thank you for not pushing, for just showing up." Keanu smiled. "Sometimes that's enough." James reached over and patted Matt's knee. Awkward, unsure, but real. "You hungry?" Matt looked at him, eyes narrowing in a faint smile. Yeah, I am." James stood slowly. "Then let's eat. But you're driving. I've had enough control for one lifetime." They left the bench behind, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Later that afternoon, the sun dipped low over the Veterans Park, painting the sky in streaks of gold and copper. Keanu lingered by the bench, giving James and Matt space as they walked ahead toward the parking lot. They looked like two silhouettes from different lifetimes. One forged in battle, the other shaped by absence, but somehow walking in step now. Sophia arrived quietly and handed Keanu a laminated printout. "We finalized the Foundation's gift," she said. "Want to show them?" Keanu glanced at the paper. It was a simple rendering of the new plaque that would be placed next to the bench. It read, "In honor of those who carried their silence like medals and still came home." When James saw it, he didn't speak right away. He ran his fingers across the image and for a long moment just stood there. Matt looked over his father's shoulder. "That's more than we deserve." Keanu shook his head. "That's exactly why it's needed." They walked back to the bench together. James reached into a small canvas satchel and pulled out one final item, a folded American flag. "I carried this home in 1971, he said. "Never unfolded it. Never felt like I earned it." Matt looked at him. "Then let's unfold it together." Side by side, with quiet ceremony, they lifted the edges and stretched it gently across the back of the bench. It didn't flap like a banner, it just rested there, anchored in memory, not spectacle. Two elderly women who'd been walking nearby stopped, quietly watching. One whispered, "That's the man from the story. The son came back." James gave a slight nod. He heard her, but for once the attention didn't make him recoil. He leaned back on the bench, gazing toward the trees. "Funny thing," he said. "All those years I thought no one remembered. Turns out I was the one who forgot what it felt like to be forgiven." Matt didn't answer. He just placed his hand on the flag, then on the bench, then on his father's. They sat that way until the sun dropped fully behind the hill and the breeze turned cool. Keanu stepped away without a word. This moment belonged to them. Later, as he passed by the small metal sign at the park entrance, he saw someone had taped a note beneath it. It read, "Heroes don't always die in battle. Some survive the silence and teach the rest of us how to live." And beneath that, in smaller handwriting, "Thank you, Mr. Langston, and thank you for coming back, Matt." The park had gained a bench, but the world had gained something greater, a story that refused to end in silence. The days had grown quieter inside the trailer. James Langston had once been a man of noise. Marching boots, engine hums, the static from old radios, and the sharp crack of rifles in foreign jungles. But in recent months, all that remained was the shuffle of worn slippers across the floor and the wheeze of a failing breath. He didn't speak much anymore. When he did, it was more of a whisper than a statement, and more memory than message. Matt noticed. He saw the change in how his father held his coffee. Two hands now, not one. He saw it in the long pauses between sentences, the way his eyes would drift toward the photo of Matt's mother, as if trying to form words she once understood better than anyone. He saw it in how often James stared at the metal case on the shelf, the one Matt had moved from the closet to the living room, a symbol, resting quietly between an unopened pack of cigarettes and a stack of war books with yellowed pages. Then, one morning, Matt found an envelope under the doormat outside his apartment. There was no stamp, no address, just his name in large, shaky letters across the front. On the back, one sentence: "If I'm gone, read this first." He knew what it meant. Still, his fingers hesitated as they tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. The handwriting was unmistakable, heavy, pressed deep into the paper, like every word had to be forced through pain. But it was clear. Intentional. No greeting, just truth. "I don't know what I left you with, maybe just silence. Maybe worse. If that's true, I'm sorry. I never stopped seeing you, not even on the worst nights. I didn't know how to come back after leaving, didn't know what kind of man I'd become. But I want you to know, when you came back, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me the chance to be human again." Matt's hands didn't shake. His breath did. He sat at the edge of his bed and read it twice. The letter didn't apologize for every mistake. It didn't try to erase what couldn't be undone. But it gave him something he didn't expect: recognition. At the bottom, one last line: "Don't let the silence take you too." Matt folded the letter with care and walked slowly to the living room. He opened the glass case with the metal and placed the paper gently beside it, like a photograph being added to an old family album. And then, for the first time in a long while, he let himself cry. The phone rang that evening, just past sunset. Matt didn't recognize the number at first, but something in him knew who it would be. He let it ring once more, then answered quietly. "Hey." Keanu's voice came through gently, not rushed, not overly emotional, just steady. "I was thinking about you today." Matt didn't respond immediately. His throat was tight, and he didn't trust what might come out. He had spent the day in silence, reading the letter over and over again, his eyes drifting to the metal each time he paused. There were so many things he wanted to say, but they felt too tangled to release. Keanu didn't push. He just stayed on the line, offering something Matt hadn't realized he needed: presence. Eventually, Matt spoke. "He left it under my door, before it happened." Keanu waited, letting the quiet stretch. Then, softly, "What did he say?" Matt tried to summarize, but the words broke before they formed. "He said, 'I gave him peace.'" The silence on the other end felt sacred, like a pause meant to honor something holy. Meant it," Keanu finally said. "You gave him more than peace. You gave him a piece of himself back." Matt swallowed hard. "I didn't think it would hit me like this. I was angry for so long, I thought I'd feel relief, or nothing." "But you felt him," Keanu replied, "even through the silence." They talked for a while, not just about James, but about things that came up only in the wake of grief. How time feels different now, how memories surface in places they never did before. Matt described how he caught himself making coffee the way his father used to, even though he didn't drink it. He admitted he sat on the porch that morning just listening to the wind, remembering the exact way James had whistled during their last walk together. "Hare told me once," Matt said, "that he didn't come home from the war. He just landed. I don't know what that means exactly, but I think I do now." Keanu exhaled slowly. "Some people never find home again. You gave him a piece of it. That matters." There were no grand declarations. No closure, not in the cinematic sense. Just a soft thread of connection, stretched across a phone line, holding two people steady in the absence of someone they'd both come to understand, far too late, and yet just in time. "I'm glad you called," Matt whispered. "So am I," Keanu said. They didn't say goodbye. Instead, Keanu added, "Let me know if you want company at the bench tomorrow." Matt didn't answer right away, but his silence this time didn't feel empty. It felt like yes. The next morning was colder than usual, a thin fog hanging low over the hills outside Matt's apartment. He tucked the letter into the pocket of his coat and slipped the metal case into his backpack. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring a speech. Just those two things. The Veterans Park was nearly empty when he arrived. He walked slowly toward the bench he and James had helped install, weathered now, but steady. The inscription still shone clearly through the mist. For those who returned home. Silently, Matt sat down, alone at first. He didn't cry, not right away. He simply opened the metal case and placed it beside him on the bench. Then he unfolded the letter one more time. If I'm gone, know this. You gave me peace. He read the words silently, mouthing them without sound. Then, gently, he reached into the metal case and placed the folded letter beside the metal. Not to close the chapter, just to let them sit together, like they were always meant to. A soft crunch of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Keanu appeared, hands in the pockets of his coat, not speaking. He simply nodded and sat down beside Matt. They watched the fog lift, inch by inch. Matt eventually spoke. He was braver in the end than I ever gave him credit for. Keanu looked ahead. Sometimes we think silence means someone gave up, but sometimes it's the weight they've been carrying all along. Matt glanced at him. I used to hate him. I hated the space he left behind. And now? Matt was quiet for a moment. Now, I just miss him. They sat in silence again, not needing to fill the space with anything more. A breeze moved the trees above them, scattering golden leaves across the path. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime clinked faintly, delicate, almost hesitant. I think I'll keep the medal on the shelf, Matt finally said, but I'll keep the letter in my pocket. Not to read, just to carry. Keanu nodded slowly. That's more than most people get. They stood, almost at the same time. Matt took one last look at the bench, then turned away. As they walked back to the car, he asked quietly, Do you believe in second endings? Keanu smiled faintly. Only if they're earned. Matt didn't say anything more. He just reached into his coat, touched the edge of the letter folded inside, and kept walking. Together they disappeared into the morning. Two men who had found, in different ways, a way back to something they both thought was gone forever. The call came early in the morning, quiet and expected. Matt had known it was coming, but still, nothing prepares you for the silence that follows when someone is truly gone. James Langston had passed away in his sleep, alone in the same trailer where he had once buried himself in silence. But now, he left behind something different. Not just war medals and yellowed letters, but connection. Matt sat on the edge of his bed, the sunrise casting soft amber through the blinds. In his hands was the small velvet box that had started it all, the Medal for Valor. He had promised himself he'd return it, and now he would, but not by slipping it away unseen. This time, it would stay with his father. By noon, the funeral arrangements had been made, a small cemetery on the edge of town, where a few other veterans rested under simple markers. The military had offered honors. Matt had accepted. He wasn't doing it for the glory or tradition. He was doing it because for the first time in years, he wasn't ashamed to say the word father. Keanu arrived early. He didn't say much, just stood beside Matt as they walked toward the burial site together. No press, no ceremony, no news vans. Just a flag, folded with precision. Just a man who had tried, in the end, to come home. The funeral was brief. A chaplain read a few words about service and sacrifice, but it was Keanu who stepped forward after, holding nothing but a folded piece of paper and the weight of all the words James never got to say out loud. He didn't talk about medals or battlefields. He talked about courage, the quiet kind. Henry didn't return from war the same man, Keanu said, voice steady, but he didn't stop trying, not once, and that matters. Matt stood motionless, the medal cradled in his palms. When the chaplain gave the final blessing, he stepped forward and knelt beside the open casket. He reached in gently, placed the medal on his father's chest, and whispered something no one else heard. Then he stood, stepped back, and nodded once. The casket closed with a soft click. The sound echoed. The final salute came from two honor guards, rifles raised in solemn rhythm. The shots rang out, sharp and final. But in Matt's chest, something else stirred. Not an ending, but a release. He looked up at the flag, now folded in a perfect triangle. It would be his to keep. But the medal? That would remain with the man who earned it. For the first time in his life, Matt felt like a son. After the ceremony, people lingered in respectful quiet. A few of the older veterans nodded at Matt, offering nothing more than a hand on the shoulder or a firm pat on the back. No long speeches, just presence. Sometimes, that's all grief really asks for. Matt stepped away from the gravesite and stood beneath a nearby oak tree. The air smelled like dust and grass, and somewhere in the distance a flag creaked gently against its pole. He held the folded triangle in both hands, his thumb tracing the edges of the fabric like it was something fragile, something earned. Keanu joined him there, not to console but to stand beside him. It had become their rhythm, unspoken understanding, wordless support. After a while, Matt finally broke the silence. Tried, didn't he? Keanu nodded. He did. Every day. Matt looked back at the grave, a simple stone etched with James William Langston, 194820225. Father, veteran, man who came home. I spent years hating him, Matt said quietly, and now I just miss him. Keanu didn't speak right away. He let the moment breathe. Then he said, "That's what love does, even when it's late. It still shows up." Matt gave a soft laugh, the kind that's half sigh. He always said he wasn't good with words, but those letters, they were all heart. Like he'd written them with every ounce of the man he wished he'd been. They mattered, Keanu said. Even unread, they mattered. Matt reached into his pocket and pulled out one of the unopened envelopes. The ink was smudged in places, the corners bent. He hadn't planned to bring one, but this morning, something told him he'd want it close. He handed it to Keanu. "Would you read it with me?" They sat on the bench, just a few steps from the grave, the one placed in memory of those who returned home silently. Keanu opened the envelope gently, unfolding the paper like it held something sacred. He began to read aloud, voice low and steady. "Dear Matt, I know I don't deserve to call you son, but I think of you every day. I hope you smile like your mother. I hope you're kind even when life isn't. And if you ever find this, I just want you to know. I was always proud. I just didn't know how to say it." Matt wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, not ashamed, not anymore. "I guess he did know the right words after all," he whispered. Keanu folded the letter and placed it gently back in Matt's hand. He found them when it mattered. And in that moment, with a grave behind them and a future in front of them, Matt realized something. He hadn't just said goodbye. He'd said thank you. The sun had started to dip lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the cemetery lawn. Most of the guests had gone, only a few remained, quiet figures drifting toward their cars with heavy hearts and softened steps. But Matt stayed. He walked back to the grave one more time, folded flag in hand, and crouched low to press his palm gently against the fresh mound of earth. His voice barely rose above the breeze. "You came back to me, Dad. Not in time for everything, but in time for enough." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the velvet box. The medal. It gleamed softly in the light, the word valor catching a hint of fire from the sunset. He didn't hesitate. With care, he laid it just inside the small recess of the headstone, where the flowers would later be placed. He rested it beside the engraved name, not as a tribute to a soldier, but as a gift from a son. Keanu watched from a respectful distance. His arms were crossed loosely, his expression thoughtful. He'd seen pain in many forms, but this quiet closing of a wound decades deep, was something else. Something sacred. Matt stood again, took one last look at the site, and turned to Keanu. His voice cracked, but there was no shame in it. "Thank you for not giving up on him. Or on me." Keanu shook his head softly. "You did the hard part. You came back." They walked together toward the edge of the field where Matt's truck was parked. The keys dangled from his hand, but he paused before opening the door. "There's this thing he wrote. In the last letter, I memorized it. Can I tell you?" Keanu nodded. Matt swallowed hard. He said, "When the war ended, my body came home, but my heart stayed behind, until I saw your eyes again." Keanu looked down for a second, then met his gaze. "That's not just a letter. That's a homecoming." They didn't need to say goodbye. Something about the silence between them held more weight than parting words ever could. Matt climbed into the truck, the seat creaking beneath him. As he pulled the door shut, Keanu took one step closer. "Hey, Matt." He looked up. "I meant what I said. If you ever want to talk about anything, you've got someone who'll listen." Matt nodded slowly. "I know." Then he started the engine. Not with grief, not with regret, but with peace. The kind a son carries when he no longer has to wonder if his father loved him. The kind you only earn when the silence has finally been broken. And as the truck disappeared down the road, the sun setting behind it like a curtain closing on an old wound, Keanu remained where he stood, still grateful, knowing one man had finally come home, even if it took a lifetime. Some sons are born into legacy. Others have to go searching for it, in forgotten trailers, dusty medals, and unread letters. But when they find it, they don't just reclaim their fathers, they reclaim themselves. Matt stood by his apartment window the night after the funeral, holding the folded flag close to his chest. Outside, the wind moved quietly, and the world kept going, but something inside him had stopped. Not out of grief, out of something deeper. Something that felt like release. On the small table beside him sat the medal case, now empty. He'd buried it with his father. It hadn't felt like an obligation, it had felt like a homecoming. A full circle, a moment of truth sealed with soil and silence. The letters were still there, a stack of them, yellowed envelopes, gently worn edges, each dated by hand. He hadn't read them all, not yet, but one a day, just like he promised. Today, it was his 14th birthday letter. It began, "I missed the last one and the one before. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking that, someday, you'll understand why I disappeared." Matt read it slowly, his thumb brushing the crease in the page. "I was afraid," the letter continued. "Not of war, not of pain. I was afraid of looking you in the eye and seeing your disappointment. I knew I couldn't undo what I broke. But I still wanted you to know I watched the sunrise every birthday and thought of you." Matt folded the paper back along the old line. He looked over at the photo Sophia had taken weeks earlier. James and Matt sitting on the memorial bench, neither smiling, neither speaking, just being there. And somehow, that had been enough. Keanu had called earlier that day. He didn't ask questions, he just said, "If you need someone to hear the silence, I'm here." Matt didn't cry, not then, not yet. But when he placed the flag beside the letters and whispered, "You made it home," he finally let go. In the days that followed, the online post about James Langston's story began to ripple outward. It hadn't included names, just a photo of a medal and a sentence. "Some fathers return through memories, some through letters, some just wait until their sons are ready." The comment section filled quickly. "My father never made it home from Vietnam, but I still have his boots by my front door. I found my mother's journal in an attic. For the first time, I knew what she carried." And then, one comment that stopped Matt cold. "My dad was James Langston's squad mate. He saved my life in 1969. We never knew what happened to him. Thank you for letting us know he found peace." Matt read it 3 times. He replied, "He talked about you. He never forgot. It didn't matter how many followers saw the post. What mattered was that someone else remembered. Someone besides him. Someone who had once stood beside his father in a place too far away and too long ago. The next day, Matt drove back to the Veterans Park alone. The bench was there, the plaque beneath it still shining. He sat for a long time, tracing the words with his fingers. For those who returned home, silently. He placed a small stone on the bench's edge. It wasn't from anywhere special, just a smooth gray pebble he'd found in the parking lot. But it mattered, because it was left with intention, because it was left by a son. Back at home, he opened another letter. This one was dated 3 years after the others. Fewer words, weaker handwriting. I don't know if you're reading these. I don't know if you ever will, but just in case, thank you for still being out there, for being my son. Matt folded it and placed it beneath the metal ribbon still resting in the empty case. Then he opened his laptop. He wrote, "Has someone in your family ever returned after years of silence? Tell us your story in the comments." He didn't sign his name. He just pressed publish and waited, not for fame, not for sympathy, but to see if maybe, just maybe, someone else was still listening. A week later, Matt received a package in the mail. No return address, no note. Inside, a folded American flag and an old photograph of 5 young soldiers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, their uniforms dusty but their faces alive with mischief and fatigue. One of them, taller, sharper in the eyes, was unmistakably his father. Taped to the back of the photo was a message in faded blue ink. "We called him Hawk. He never looked away, even when we did." Matt didn't cry right away. He just stared at the picture for a long time, memorizing the faces, wondering who had sent it, wondering if any of them were still around. Then he turned it over and taped it next to the metal case. That night, he called Keanu, not to say much, just to check in, just to hear the voice of someone who had been there when things broke open. Keanu listened, like he always did. At the end of the call, Matt said, "I used to think people left because they didn't care. Now I wonder if they stayed silent because they cared too much." Keanu paused. Sometimes silence isn't absence, it's armor. They didn't need to say more. On the other side of town, Keanu stood at the foundation office, looking at a bulletin board labeled "Stories We Carry." He pinned something new that night, the sketch of a folded flag, a letter, and the faint outline of a bench beneath a tree. Underneath, he wrote, "Some sons find their way home by walking through someone else's past. Some fathers are waiting." The screen faded to black. A final voiceover played. "Some sons are born into legacy. Others have to go searching for it. In forgotten trailers, dusty medals, and unread letters. But when they find it, they don't just reclaim their fathers, they reclaim themselves." Has someone in your family ever returned after years of silence? Tell us your story in the comments. She spent her life cleaning other people's homes until Keanu brought her back to her own. The video ended, but the story, it stayed right where it was meant to, inside the people who remembered, and inside the ones who finally understood why it's never too late to come home.